Welcome to Real Estate in Real Time. I'm Woody Zimmerman here with Mark Skabowski of Remax Lakes. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Doing fine. I know today you wanted to talk about something that helps people buy, whether it's a house or a car or whatever. Incentives.
Incentives and also concessions, I guess.
Concessions, okay.
So, a lot of times when we're thinking about buying, all anybody ever worries about is the price.
Yeah.
Right? Many times I get an offer, well, they take X. Mm-hmm. You got a house listed or somebody's seen a listing and they're, well, do you think they'll take less? Well, I don't know. Number one, we haven't seen the house.
Yeah.
To determine that, how do I know that from just looking at it on the web? Well, it's been on the market a while. You think they'll take less? Well, they could. Maybe. Who knows what the seller's motivation is to sell? But many times, all we think about is that purchase price. There's other pieces to a purchase agreement, which we've done shows on the purchase agreement, top to bottom. What's involved in an offer? Well, price is a big part of that, but another piece to that is possible concessions for a seller. And as the market is shifting back towards that more balanced market, I'm not saying we're going to a buyer's market yet. We might just roll right through balanced and go to a buyer's. Who knows?
Right.
Who knows? But, for years we've been in essentially a seller's market to where sellers have ruled the roost. And what does that mean? Number one, they weren't reducing their price very much.
Nope.
I mean, homes were selling at or above list price. People were waiving inspections because seller might have 5 offers, and if you offered and you said you wanted inspections, you might get tossed aside.
Sure.
Not considered. They're going to take an offer, of course. If you were the seller, you would do the same. One that doesn't have inspections on
the best offer for you.
Right. So and for those in that same time period, many buyers were not asking for concessions. What does that mean? It's to where the seller is paying some of your costs. So they're either maybe helping with closing costs. So in the offer, you'd say, I'll offer you $200,000, and I'd like you to pay $5,000 of my closing costs, prepaids and or for my inspections, or $6,000 or $2,000 or whatever that is. But that's what a concession is. It's where the seller is helping you out with those things. They're giving to you. But again, for years, there were limited concessions. Now, we did have 100% buyers, so USDA, VA buyers, perhaps people with not enough money to cover their closing costs, sellers would consider, but again, if you had somebody coming in cash, not asking for those concessions, and more than likely they were going to take that other offer. But what do concessions mean to the seller? So if the house is listed at $200,000, and you're asking the seller to pay $5,000 towards your closing costs, prepaids, and or inspections, what does that mean? Well, the seller is really looking at a $195,000 offer. They're not looking at $2,000 because they are, if you go to closing, they are paying $5,000 of those costs for you on your behalf. So closing costs, potentially maybe a home warranty. We don't think about that, but a seller may say, okay, I'll agree, I'll give you a home warranty. During that last couple of years, weren't seeing that. There were no concessions. Maybe making repairs. In the offer, you're right, well, there's some damaged screens, I'd like you to fix them. It didn't come up as a result of inspections. So during the COVID years, those unicorn years, concessions were
out the window. There
weren't any. But we're beginning to see them right now, and many times what people are asking for is closing costs to cover their closing costs. What is the closing cost? The cost of closing the loan, the cost of financing on your behalf. So maybe it's the appraisal, it's any upfront fees that the lender's charging you. A lot of things go into that closing cost. Also, rate buy down. So buying a point. A point is a 0.25% drop in your interest rate. It's paying prepaid interest. That's really what a point is.
So the seller
the seller could, in those concessions, the buyer could say, I want you to give me $10,000 towards concessions.
Oh, wow.
And we're seeing those. We're seeing those because what people are doing then is buying the interest rate down to get it to a level they can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 1% of the loan value, and you get a 0.25% point in the interest rate. So if interest rates are 7,
Mm-hmm.
and you're financing $200,000, for $2,000 you can get your interest rate at 6.775. So 6 7/8.
Yeah. Okay.
6 3/4, whatever that is, whatever it works out to, a 0.25 percentage point. I can't do the math in my head right now, I guess. But if you, whatever that is, you're getting a lower interest rate. So what is the benefit to the buyer of that? A lower payment, because the interest rate is lower at this point.
Right.
So again, those are concessions that sellers are willing to give to get people purchasing their home,
Mm-hmm.
which is significant.
Mm-hmm.
It's significant. You know, if you go from a 7% interest rate to a 6 3/4
Mm-hmm.
interest rate, that's a 0.25 percentage point that's going to be over the life of the loan.
Right.
So your payment is less. So it's really, a point is prepaid interest. You
Mm-hmm.
pay today for the use of that money, the loan amount, over the 30-year period.
Mm-hmm.
So for the buyer, it makes it more affordable. So many more buyers today are asking for not only closing costs, but for sellers to concede, give them concessions to pay their interest rate down.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Welcome back. You're listening to Real Estate in Real Time. I'm Woody Zimmerman here with Mark Skabowski of Remax Lakes, and we're talking about concessions and incentives and so forth. And you talked about one where the seller would actually pay down like a 0.25 percentage of the interest rate.
Yeah.
Which that's a new one to me. I did bring up the whole fact that in July of last year,
24,
there was a change, and where buyers actually are required to pay for the realtor fees unless they make an agreement with the seller to take care of those.
Well, so you're right in that there was a change in 2024.
Okay.
The buyer needs to sign a buyer agency agreement.
Right.
And agree to pay their agent some percentage. It's negotiable. They need to agree to pay their agent. Mm-hmm. Now, when we write a contract, they have updated our purchase agreements.
Okay.
To where on the purchase agreement, there is a block where we check that the seller agrees to pay the buyer's agent compensation in some percentage.
It gets a little confusing.
It gets a little confusing because, I mean, for a long time, buyers didn't have any cost related to that.
No.
Now, the reality is most sellers are willing to pay something towards the buyer's compensation agreement.
Because that's the way it's been forever.
Because the way they've done it.
Yeah.
But some have not. Yeah. Some are not willing to. So as a buyer, that is a potential cost for you if the seller is unwilling. And so the way that I'm conveying it to buyers for me is, look, you're hiring me, and this is our agreed upon rate for you to hire me. I'm going to do my best to negotiate to have the seller pay that compensation. But if they don't, this is what we've agreed to. That's what it's going to cost you to do that.
There's another concession, so to speak.
It's another concession, yes, for the seller.
Yeah.
Now it was in there before. Now it's just out in broad daylight.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Right.
So it is a part of it. Now the incentives are really to draw people in.
Yeah.
And when we're saying incentives, sometimes sellers will offer that. On a resale home, they will offer, hey, I'm willing to pay your buyer broker's commission at XYZ, whatever that number is.
Okay.
Or I'm willing to provide a home warranty, which could be a concession or incentive. If you're using it to try to draw people in, it's an incentive. If it's in the purchase agreement negotiated, it's a concession.
Yeah, right.
So what are builders doing? So we've probably all heard them on the radio. You've seen them.
Oh, yeah.
To where builders are offering lower interest rates. I got a text from a local builder the other day. I mean, it's a bigger company. They've got representatives, and they said, hey, we're offering an incentive special financing rate for something under contract by May 30th, and closed by July 31st. Interest rate will be 5.5%.
Right, which is a great rate right now.
It's a great rate right now. Because rates are at 7%.
Yeah.
So builders are offering incentives. Builders are also lowering price nationally. Now they're not dropping it, well below, because ultimately, when I say well below, they're not taking, if they sold somebody a house in January for $300,000, they're not dropping their price to $200,000 because they want to get this house sold, because the person who just paid $300,000 is not going to be real happy.
No.
So basically, they're sabotaging their own valuations in their neighborhoods if they do that. That's why they're more willing to offer these incentives, trying to get people in. Why? Because they still want to build houses and move houses.
Yeah.
So it's an important piece. I mean, it's the free market at work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a free market at work. So essentially, about 6%, this is a national statistic, and 74% of quick move-in homes that can be occupied within 90 days. And that's actually that message I got, that text I got.
Okay.
If you were to buy something in May or close on it in May or write an offer in May and get possession in July, that house is pretty much built.
Okay.
So what they're doing is trying to make sure that the inventory they're creating is selling.
Okay.
So with those numbers that I just gave you, builders nationally, that's the number of percentage of homes which are offering incentives.
Wow.
Pretty significant.
That's a lot,
right?
yeah.
Over half are offering incentives, trying to get people in there. So for buyers, if you're thinking, hey, maybe a new home was never in my future,
Mm-hmm.
even though the prices are up, with those incentives that they're offering, new may be an option. And you and I have had the discussion before on air. Many times we don't, if a house isn't built, we're not thinking about that, because it could take 5 months for a house to be completed.
Right.
Well, these are essentially spec homes that builders are building. Build it and they will come.
Yeah.
So now they've got it built. They're paying for the materials, for the labor, for everything that they've done for that.
Yeah.
They're trying to incentivize to get that house moved without lowering the price, without having to reduce the prices.
Sure.
So I would anticipate we're going to see more and more of those incentives coming on. But the bottom line for buyers, concessions and incentives should always be considered when you're writing an offer. That should be part of the process when you craft an offer, when you put an offer together on a property. It's much, much more than just price.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's that a lot of great things to think about. I mean, that's a lot of information.
A lot of stuff.
All in 15 minutes right there. Well, if you would like to continue this conversation with Mark, make sure you reach out. Your contact info?
Sure. The website's skabowskiteam.com. Phone number's 574-527-0660. Can always email me, mark@skabowskiteam.com. Check us out on YouTube.
Yeah, we're on YouTube. Right.
Mark Skabowski Team. Subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
We're getting more and more views. Life is good.
Oh, that's good. All right, awesome. You've been listening to Real Estate in Real Time. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.